Sailing, a sport that displays such serenity and grace.
Sailing is fun, and it's a sport, but it's a freedom.
A sport that commands talents and strengths to battle against one of the most powerful forces of nature.
You got wind, you got water, waves, heat, cold.
The sport of racing requires physical fitness, enduring strength, precision, and perseverance.
The sport is a combination between athleticism and it's also a bit of art.
All over the world, on the 7 seas, sailors are inspired to ride above it all.
The hardships of doing some things, but then the ultimate thrill of harnessing that power of the wind and making a sailboat with no engine, no gasoline, no nut, no tires, going super fast, faster than the wind.
Peter Holmberg is one such sailor.
He's a very calculating and determined sailor. The kill instinct is there.
There's no one more focused than Peter.
He never lost sight of the goal.
One thing about Peter that I think separates him from any sailor is his preparation.
He was a daredevil.
Free spirit, fun-loving, but there was always that side of Peter that was...
October 4th, 1960, Peter William Holmberg was born on St. Thomas in the United States Virgin Islands. His father, Richard, first fell in love with the island while serving on a submarine in the U.S. Navy. Richard later returned with his new bride, Louise, for a honeymoon. The couple never left.
So our mother, Louise, was a water baby from the start. Stories my grandfather tells of her back in Chicago, and in summers in Michigan, she was always in the water, swimming or water skiing, and coming to these islands was a heaven for her in terms of the water. You could swim all year. And she was the first women's world champion in sunfish, which is the small type of boat that we learned to sail in 1963 at Sapphire Beach.
My dad was a great man, a really good fellow. Obviously, he was a Navy guy. He was in the submarines, so liked the water. He was also from Chicago, but obviously he liked a bit of adventure because he took off and went in the submarines and based down here, and then had the courage to take a chance and come down here in 1958 with my mom and convince her to give it a go.
As they started to raise a family, the Holmbergs immersed themselves in the culture of the islands, and the islands became home.
I remember the Holmbergs, or Humbug, as we used to tease each other. Always running around in the bush and running around, around the horses. His parents were very involved in the community. Here's a little known fact. His parents were founding members of the Ramblers Club, which founded the Gypsy Troupe in 1952.
While working at the local airport, Richard was introduced to a small family new to St. Thomas from the island of St. Kitts. The single mother with 2 children needed a hand settling into the Virgin Islands. The Holmbergs opened their home, and the families adopted each other, and the mother would have a profound effect on the Holmberg family.
Cynthia and her 2 children moved into our house when I was 2 years old, and Cynthia was my nanny. She was my auntie. She was everything to us, and so she helped around the house. When Mom and Dad went out to work, she looked after John and I, and she had her 2 kids as well. So it was like 4 of us kids growing up together, and Cynthia and her kids lived with us until I was 16.
But these kids was special. There was something about the children and the parents. Very, very, very good. And then you try to give them the best of what you know how to do.
She was part of our family. We'd go to St. Kitts in the summertime sometimes and stay with her there.
They used to love to sail. They loved the ocean. They like little sharks. But I used to get scared sometimes if I could go further. If they go further than where my knees reach. I said, oh no. Now if you do that one more time, we're going home and you're going to bed, okay? You're taking a nap.
Enamored with life by the sea, the Holmbergs built a lifestyle in the world of sailing. Richard and Louise believed that the sea was a precious resource and believed it to hold a lifetime of valuable lessons and boundless opportunity.
Pretty soon after that, Dad and Mom bought this little sunfish. It was a sailfish, actually, on Sapphire Beach. Him and his friends were there, and they just got into sailing. And then very soon after, they started this yacht club where I'm sitting now. That was in about 1965. I was about 5 years old. And it just became the thing. Him and his friends, just sailing blossomed for them, and bought one boat, bought a next boat.
And the Virgin Islands back in the 1970s was truly a powerhouse of sailing. You would see 50 sunfishes rigged up on the beach. They had a regatta called the Don Q International where some of the best sailors in the world would come to our club to race in snipes, lasers, fins, Flying Dutchmans, many Olympic caliber sailors. Guys like Rudy Thompson, his father, Dick Holmberg, helped bring these people to the yacht club. So we grew up in a golden era where this was really a center of racing throughout the world. And we were exposed to that. And that really gave us the fire to go out and compete internationally.
The Holmbergs introduced Peter and his older brother John to sailing at ages 4 and 6.
Being just 2 years apart, I'd say we were quite close brothers,
Two boys growing up in the islands is a rambunctious crowd. And I got to remember, for a lot of that time, we also had Dennis and Diane, our godbrother, godsister, with us too. But when we were really young, I have a memory of the consternation that my godmother had because she couldn't find us. We were at Lindbergh Bay at the house on the end of the point, and we were 3 and 2 years old and had disappeared. And we had gone down the little dirt track to the water, and we're playing in the ocean. And that's, scary, surprising, shocking, but in the islands that was normal for us,
Now you mix in there the sailing aspect. We're both sailing, and so you have fun with your brother, but you also fight with your brother and compete with your brother.
I drilled a hole in his finger one day, so we're even.
So we had a good, healthy competition growing up as well. John was the bigger boy, the older brother, and he beat me. He was the better sailor, the better everything.
As they grew up immersed in the world of sailing, Peter and John developed a love for sailing, and the beautiful waters of the Caribbean became their playground.
Sailing is fun, and it's a sport, but it's a freedom. I mean, imagine a kid 5, 6 years old having his own, be like having your own car for somebody that doesn't sail. I had my own little boat. I could just go out and play. We could chase each other. We could play hide and seek with our boats. We could go off to different islands. It was no challenge. It was nothing but joy, man.
I did some racing up in Lake Erie as a kid. That's where I learned how to sail. And so I thought, I'm going to come down here and, show these islanders a thing or two. Well, it didn't exactly turn out that way. I mean, all I saw was the back of their boat sailing away. I mean, it was just, the sailing here was a completely different level, so it was a huge eye-opener.
You come out of Maine, you think you've got some sailing skills, and then you show up at the yacht club in St. Thomas where these guys have been on boats since they were little kids. And it was a different feeling for sure.
In the very beginning, it was more about camaraderie and having fun as children. And then through the evolution of the club and sailing, we also became far more competitive in the sport of sailing.
They both started off doing different kinds of regattas on the smaller dinghies and learning that they were pretty competitive and were able to travel off island.
And John and I, this was our ballpark. This is where we played after school. We came out here and messed about in boats. So you'd have to say that's kind of what became our passion or our thing. And then competition grew out of that.
For Peter, sailing became a passion, and his competitive spirit grew.
I think that really his breakout was when, as far as competitive sailing, is when he went through the junior sailing in Sunfish, and then his first big event, from my memory, was the Sunfish World, where he was able to raise his game to a completely different level.
And I just got a hold of a sunfish and trained by myself and went over there. And I finished third out of 100 and something boats against all the grown-ups. And that was probably for me when I stepped into the bigger league and realized that I had a knack for this and I enjoyed the competition.
The extreme activities and free lifestyle by the sea was quite a distraction for Peter, and he became disenchanted with school.
I had a little bit of a uncharacteristic growing up, unusual growing up school-wise. I stopped going to high school. And so I took a bit of an uncharted path, but I'm proud of it, so I don't mind saying. I dropped out of high school. I was playing and having fun without serious discipline. But luckily, with the right and wrong defined in me, I realized at about 16 years old that I needed more schooling. So I went off to the States to college on my own tuition, and just took a break from the islands and went and did some studying away from my friends and my bad influences. While I was out there, that was probably when it really occurred to me that I had something special. I went to a school that had a sailing team and competed. I was in the league against Berkeley and San Francisco and Stanford University. And I was at a little school, which I chose, Sonoma State, something small in Northern California. And just being thrust there amongst it and diving in, and all of a sudden I'm whooping some white boys' butts. I then learned a little bit more that I do have some good skill sets. And that probably is when it switched for me to being, well, I got something good here, and this is a bit of my base, my strengths, my forte. And it became who I was, I say, around that time. You know, I was a sailor at heart, and that was my specialty.
While realizing his passion, Peter started to apply his business knowledge to further his possibilities in the sport.
I took a trip across the country and spent some time with Peter out in California. And he at that point was trying to get fundraising sponsorship for the Sonoma State sailing team. And so we were all the vineyards out there, and he had a place up there, in Sonoma, or I think it's Sonoma or something, just north of San Francisco. So he came up with this great idea. Well, let's go out. He put together his sponsorship package and all that, and he was going to go out to all the wineries and the vineyards and see if there was a way to get sponsorship out of it. So I'm like along for the ride. I'm just there to drink the wine, you know. So we're going on. The first couple, he's got his blue blazer on and his khaki pants and his wrinkly shirt and his tie, and trying to go into these guys and making a presentation and all this and that. But after that was done, we'd have a couple tastes of wine at each one. Well, after about the fourth, fifth one of these, I started noticing that the level of professionalism of the presentation started going down, and the wine tasting started going up. And I never forget, but the last one we walked in, and it was Dry Creek Vineyards. And Peter walked in, and he had this pack, and he just threw it on the counter and said, "Give this to somebody important." So it went to full extremes. The irony of this story is they were the ones that ended up playing a huge sponsorship role with the team. And if you look at the Dry Creek labels and all of that, the guy was a big sailor. And I don't know whether there was some, but if you look at their labeling, everything, they're a big sponsorship of sailing.
After his college experience, Peter set his sights on following his father's footsteps by entering the 1984 Olympics.
Yeah, so I came out of university, got my degree. My dad convinced me to not just do 2 years, but do 4. Thank you, Dad. That was smart. And it taught me about setting a goal and completing your goal, It really taught you to discipline, commitment. Those are the big words there. So leaving college, the 84 Olympics was 2 years away, and that was what I set as my goal. And, we got help from the VI Olympic Committee, but we're not a big funded country. So and especially the sport of sailing, you got to buy a boat, and it's a little expensive.
And he started off, I believe, just after he was out of college and getting ready for the 1984 Olympics. And he had his own plan coming off of college. He brought people down here to train with him in the Finn class. But he also got a bus and drove across the country in this bus and moved out to Los Angeles, set up in a parking lot, and had his own little place to go, and was out there to train and really concentrate on the 84 campaign.
While training, Peter found work as a sailmaker to make ends meet.
Locally, he basically was working for, I think it was Shore Sails at the time, building sails with a guy named Dan Neary, who actually went on to be one of the head sailmakers and designers of North Sails, which is the biggest sail company in the world. And Peter just followed that footstep, racing in the Rolex and the BVI spring regattas on big boats, skip ring boats, winning pretty much every single one of those regattas. And his career just kept going higher and higher. He kept raising the bar with all the different levels of events he was attending.
So what I did for the '84 games was just everything I could. I worked all day. I got a job. I found a job with a bit of freedom, which was sailmaking, so I could take off and do my races and do my training. And so I did a 2-year campaign. I would call it a very grassroots, basic campaign. Begged, borrowed money, sold t-shirts to get enough money to buy this boat. But proud that I did it on my own. I had obviously friends helping me. My parents gave me a little money, friends here at the yacht club. And so I did this 2-year project. I basically left St. Thomas 6 months before the '84 games. I got enough money to get a boat, and I borrowed a van, a motorhome from a guy here. And I just went to the States. The games were in Los Angeles. So I went up there 6 months before and just trained for 6 months with the Americans and whatever other countries were there. And so it was kind of an intensive 6 months training. And I finished 11th in that '84 Olympics out of 36 boats.
Peter considered his 11th place run in the 1984 Olympics as a success and found the motivation to take another crack at it in 1988.
So I came away, I had a really nice debrief, you would say, from that '84 games. I had to drive my fin, my sailboat, on top of my van all the way from California back to Florida to store it. That's a long drive. A little good, quiet time to think. And I would say that's when I hatched my plan. And what I saw, that it's a 4-year cycle for the Olympics. And some guys just roll right into the next one. And personally, I saw burnout. And my knowledge of training, you got to peak at the right time. You can't train for 4 years for one race and not burn out, in my opinion.
For me, one of the most exciting times and one of the biggest accomplishments of my life was Peter at that point had asked me, or whether he asked or I volunteered or whatever, but I ended up being his kind of weight and conditioning coach for the run at the '88 Olympics. And I had studied exercise physiology in school, and I had done a lot of weight training, and Peter was never much of a weightlifter, this or that.
So I set a game plan of giving 2 years off from full focus. I would still sail and compete and race and learn, but when you dive in and focus on Olympic campaign with just that boat, I decided to only do a 2-year campaign. So this was my earliest game planning, was I made a plan to take 2 years of just fun and sailing, racing other types of boats, having fun in life, working, still racing. That was still my life, my forte. And then 2 years to the day before the Olympics, I pulled the cover off my fin here at the yacht club and started my training.
So I would go over 5:30 in the morning, meet Peter. We did this little, what do we call it, the jungle gym or something like that, because he had a little front porch, and we had steel plates and whatever we could find for weights and pulleys set up all over, and we'd do weight training for an hour and a half every morning, and then he would go out and sail all day, and after work I would go meet him, and then we'd go do our conditioning in the afternoon.
Kurt's an athletic guy as well, and Kurt would always push him harder and harder. And the two of them are two mean athletes, you know, they trained hard together.
About a year before the games, I used to cut the bush by my mother's house for every month. And I showed up one day and she had rented a lawnmower. I think it was the first ones brought to the island, they were renting them. I'd seen it on TV, but I'd never used one. And anyway, early morning, a little bit of dew in the grass, and me and this mower tried to go up and down the hill, and me and the mower went down.
There was an event that night, you know, where everybody was a hum about it because, you know, he was mowing his lawn barefoot, like a good boy, and
My boy goes and chops off his toe.
Immediately everybody was, you know, a frenzy that, you know, if you don't have a big toe, you can't have balance, and if you can't have balance, you're done.
Yeah, we were kind of, Peter, what were you thinking?
When I heard about the toe, I was like, oh, this is not good. This is not good. And I remember when I first heard it, you're thinking, what's happened? Is this it? Is it over? I mean, you know, somebody loses their toe.
So, hospital, they couldn't put it back on. I had to sit there in bed for a month with the thing in the air. And this is a little bit of come to Jesus time. And I learned something. So for a month, I'm sitting there with this foot in the air, looking at the toe missing. And you can't get away from it. It just looks wrong, you know, it's not there. And I didn't know if I could run again. I didn't know if I could train again. how this is going to set back my physical abilities for racing. And what I learned from all that is that if you really want to learn how much you want something, take it away from you. And that's what happened to me. And I was doing a campaign, I would say it's a B-level campaign, you know, on pace to be top 10. But when you took away my baby almost like that, I came out firing. I was a whole different person. When I got back on my feet and started training again, there was a whole different look in my eye. People saw it. There was no playing around. There was no having fun on the weekends.
What happened? Because you think of the balance and all that so much. But, you know, that's Peter. You know, it obviously it had an impact on him for a short period of time, but I even think it made him more driven. The fact that, you know, you take that negative and turn it into a positive and say, okay, let's get this done.
Getting to know Peter. You know, some people, let's be honest, some people have a hard time interacting with him because he is so focused. And many people can't understand that. Peter didn't have many, you know, light moments. It was all about serious stuff. And if you couldn't relate to that and appreciate his focus, you probably thought Peter was not your type of guy.
It was now all business. I just about had my dream taken from me. This is my one chance at the Olympics to maybe get a medal for my country and put a fire in my belly like I never had. And I've read about it in years past, and I tell people this story, you know, that there's something that's post-traumatic growth. When you read about this, that you have a trauma, take somebody down to their core and really see what they want to achieve and what they want to do, and that's exactly what it was for me. So yeah, I lost a toe. I got 4 on one foot. I only got 9, but that thing gave me the fire to get a medal, and I credit that incident with helping me win a medal for sure.
It's become just a little star footnote on Peter's history that he still jokes about, you know.
Again.
Didn't faze him.
Iron the prize.
Yeah.
Didn't faze him. Let's get over that.
That's good. That's funny you brought that up because yeah, I remember that. I can't remember where it was that night, but there was some function that he was coming to that night or something, and it was a big calamity.
And to him, it was not a big deal.
Moral of the story is mow the lawn with your shoes on.
And the other real key things was these Olympics were going to be in Korea, in a very unknown part. No sailing of races there that any of us had gone to. Unknown part of the world, not a real sailing nation. I made the decision to go to Korea on a scouting trip a year in advance of the Olympics, see what the conditions were going to be like. It turned out, rather than the brochure that said light winds, it was dangerously windy, scary windy. Big seas, a lot of currents, a lot of wind. So that was huge. Second thing was I learned they built 10 prototype boats that year in advance for us to borrow. I rented one, checked it out, and found it so unusual I decided to make that a priority and bought it and brought it back here to St. Thomas. So learning that it was rough, realizing that we had some of the roughest, best conditions to train in right here at home, and this unusual boat, these are key things. So I bought this boat, shipped it here, and I also modified my training plan. Rather than going to the States for competition, I decided to make my final year of training right here.
Peter was always on the water. He was constantly in the boat training for the '88 games. And I think one of the smartest things that he did was bring in 2 very, very competitive, I believe two of the highest ranked Finn sailors in the US came down to train with him because the conditions in the Virgin Islands were similar to what he would experience in Korea. So, but I think the first impression obviously is this time on the water. Every time I was down there, he was either in the boat or working on his boat or getting out of his boat because he had just spent a few hours on the water.
He just would put himself into a total routine of getting up in the morning and doing the same thing that he would do on race days. So it was whether the food he ate or the sleep he got or getting up in the morning was just all very much his game day plan.
My mindset going into the '88 games, I learned from '84 that nerves can be your biggest obstacle. And I went in as an unknown. I didn't go to the World Championships the year before. I did some racing in the States just to get comfortable around 20, 30 boats. And so the nerves I wanted to make sure weren't going to hold me back.
When we arrived in Korea, in Busan, where they put us up in this hotel, and the room he was assigned was on the roadside of the hotel. He looked at me and said, "You've got to get me out," and so I'm looking out at the ocean in the morning. I need to be doing that. And so we switched around his rooms, and it was just, you know, his whole concentration on that was pretty amazing.
The weather was extreme, and I gotta say, when things get scary, you forget nerves. You just do your instincts, man. And growing up here in the islands, we got big breeze, we got big weather, and that was more of a comfort zone for me. So the wilder it got, I mean, we're all a little bit scared at times because it was rough weather, but honestly, it didn't scare me as much as probably the other guys, you know?
The conditions were much stronger and rougher than we were expecting. And after the first day of races, when Peter was 17th, we were kind of going, oh no, what's going to happen now? But he came back from that and won several races, was over early in one race that he actually won, and he must have gone back 3 or 4 times to try to get redressed for not being over early. He hunted down all the cameramen that would have been out there taking pictures, trying to get his the starting lineup shown again over and over again, and the jury actually listened to him 2 or 3 times before they finally said, no, you don't get that one.
While preparing for the final race, Peter discovered he had a cracked mast.
I had a piece of damaged equipment, my mast. I did an inspection a week before the event, just double check everything's sorted, and we found this crack halfway through my mast. And I had a backup one, but it wasn't my baby. And I went and trained with it for a few days, and it just wasn't the same, didn't have my speed. So I had this guy, Pierre Dome, he was kind of our equipment man, local boy from here. And the two of us sat there and talked about it, studied it, and had enough faith that the thing wasn't going to break during the games, and made the decision to go with my damaged equipment. And pretty ballsy move, you know, because every race that thing could go, especially when the weather got rougher and rougher. And I must say, in race 1, one guy broke his mast. And after the race, I went over to check it out and see where it broke. It broke exactly where mine was cracked. So you got this going on in the back of your mind, you know. And so that was there for me. I must say, I learned I was a little more religious than I thought. You know, I'd get down and pray just before the start of each race. And but you know, the harder the fight, the better the victory. And I think I had the fight in me.
It was a valuable lesson for all sailors. Safety is first. Everyone got home safely in spite of torn sails and sore muscles.
It was pretty intense, this final race. So just to give you a recap there, the race takes about 2 hours, and nervous going to the race as normal. Halfway through the race, I looked around. I was in about 6th position, and I added up who was in front and who was behind, and I wasn't getting a medal at that time. And I switched gears. I said, wait a second. Finishing 4th, 5th, and 6th ain't gonna be good enough. Time to take a chance. It was the windiest race of the regatta. So all of a sudden, I just put fear to the side and just went for it. Passed everybody in front of me except for one guy. Coming into the finish, I had to put one boat between me and Spain, and I had the U.S. there.
One of the guys from the States who should have protected him better didn't.
And I tried to keep him lined up and stacked and covered him, but you can't in that much wind. Anyway, I crossed the finish line in 2nd. Spain comes in from the right, U.S. from the left. If U.S. crosses in front, I get a gold. If Spain crosses in front, I get a silver. Spain crosses in front by about 3 feet.
At the finish, it was Peter Holmberg from the U.S. Virgin Islands taking the race.
I get the silver. There was about a quarter second of, and then I went, I got a silver medal. And I never dreamed of it, honestly. I went to the Olympics thinking, okay, if I can top 10, I'd be happy. All of a sudden, your world, you go, silver medal in the Olympics for my country, Virgin Islands. So it's an hour's sail back to land. And I just sat in my boat, just, you know, your mind just going, wow, life might change, man. I just got myself a medal, and yeah, elation, you know. And then it was a blur for the next few weeks, man, from the awards ceremony that I got to later, and coming back here and a parade for me, and party up at the government house with the governor and all the dignitaries. Wow, you know, it's a dream. And sometimes when the dream comes true, you're a little bit shocked, overwhelmed at the moment. But, you know, it changes you, man. It's obviously the biggest thing I've ever done in my life. And to set a goal and climb such a steep mountain and actually make it to the top. A wonderful thing.
I just remember I was living up on Flag Hill at the time and getting a call about 3 o'clock in the morning when he called me and said he'd won the silver medal. And I remember just letting out a hoot back then. I mean, that was really, I'll never forget that moment, standing there and hearing him say that. And he'd had a couple of whatever the local cocktails were over there, and he was feeling pretty good. So that was pretty exciting.
The entire delegation, which most of them were up in Seoul, were elated to hear the news.
That silver medal that the hometown boy won was a big deal to many people.
Our flight was out very early the next morning, and Brother B got us to the airport way early, and we were on the plane with a good portion of the team, and the pilot announced that we had a medal winner on board, and would he come up and sit in first class on this long flight from Busan, or from Seoul back to the States. And Peter looked around and said, "Nope, I think I want to stay with my friends back here with my teammates." And that's just the kind of guy he was.
So we heard he was flying in. Somebody volunteered a Mustang convertible so we could fold it back and he could sit on the back there. My mother and father, who were divorced, buried the dagger and jumped in the car too. And so we had Peter and Mom and Dad and me, and we started a motorcade.
And when they come into St. Thomas and they get first prize, the steel band. You ever heard the steel band? Oh man, music to the ears, everybody winding the bum.
It was island-wide. Huge gathering at the airport, huge reception here honoring with the governor of the Virgin Islands, and all the people, the outpouring of just total elation and positive vibration of Peter winning, silver medal in the Olympics it was overwhelming.
If I was a basketball player and I just won a medal in the Olympics, professional league, that's what you'd grow up thinking about. Sailing did not have a professional league at this time. So honestly, I felt pride in winning this medal, but it didn't say, ooh, payday or anything to me. It just meant, cool, I'm coming back home, I'm a star, put us on the map, Virgin Islands bad. And I just came back and went back to life as normal, a little bit prouder, but just normal life. Went back to work. I was working in my daddy's real estate office. And here's where the doors open. A big race boat came to town for a race that we were hosting here. And they just called the yacht club and said, hey, we need somebody local to show us which rock is which. And the guy, I just happened to be there having a beer at the bar, And the bartender goes, hold on a second. Hey, Pete, man, help this fellow out. Yeah, can I help you? Yeah, can I help you out? Sure, man, I'll come down. So I went down and met him, and he says, yeah, okay, we'd like you to race with us for the next week. So off we go racing. And the boat is Matador is the name of it, Bill Koch, a very famous, wealthy guy. And I'm sitting in the back, and we're sailing along, and he just starts to talk to me. He says, so, you're a sailor? Yeah. Well, what have you done, young man? Well, I just won an Olympic medal a couple of weeks back, Whoa, hey, let Peter steer for a minute, And that was the opening. And I grabbed the wheel of this 80-foot boat. Mind you, I just came from my 13-foot fin. I get on this wheel of this 80-foot boat, I look for the bow, and I just do what's natural, man. I see a wave, and I jump my wave, and I go. And all of a sudden, the crew all turned back and said, who just did that, And all of a sudden, I got all 20 guys on board looking at, who's this guy, And that opened the door. The owner came to me that afternoon and said, hey, we're building a new boat. I want you to come on board and be with the helmsman for us. And wow. Oh, and we're going to pay you. Wow. So that was the first door opening. And that's when professional sailing was just getting started. So call it luck or good fortune, whatever. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. Got my medal. Pro sailing just became a part of things where they're paying you to do this. And word of mouth with the guys around you. I also got along well with everybody. I wasn't a prima donna. I was just an island boy. And I think that bode well for me. A guy on another boat said, hey, we want you to come race our boat too. He crewed on another boat, so he introduced me to that owner. And that was the opening for me to professional sailing.
And so it began. Peter became team helmsman for Matador 2, helping them to capture a win at the Maxi World Championship. This would be Peter's first time experiencing the rewards of pro sailing.
In the sport of sailing, I must say, you know, think about it, I'm not running an asphalt track or inside a ring. I'm out in just the natural elements of the world. And so I take my boat, my own ship, I go out there, I get dealt with whatever the day throws at me. Calm, rough, scary kind. And it's just limitless what it can give to you, you know, the challenge and the reward. So the hardships of doing some things, but then the ultimate thrill of harnessing that power of the wind and making a sailboat with no engine, no gasoline, no nothing, no tires, going super fast, faster than the wind. There's nothing like it. So yes, that thrill hits you in the heart, and I love it.
Coming into his own in his sailing career, Peter began what's called match racing and developed a team of Virgin Islanders to compete internationally, entering again as unknowns in wildcard slots. Through a series of wins, he quickly emerged to a number 3 ranking in 1999, reaching the top ranking in 2001 through 2002.
Him and I and Morgan Avery and Seth Morton, Steve Morton, and Patrick Farrington, we raced in many different match race regattas around the world, England and Spain and Japan. And then he launched himself into the match racing circuit.
But to me, what separates Peter from everybody else is his ability to, 1, stay calm, and 2, to anticipate what's happening. I mean, he can see so far down the road what to expect, and he would take care of so many problems before they happen just because he knew they were happening, and he was able to sidestep them or take a precaution and take a different tactic so it didn't happen. So the racing was very serious. I mean, it was always get up in the morning, no matter how much we had to drink the night before, get out early, go out, practice hard for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then sails were down, and you'd have some swigs of water and something to eat, a sandwich or something, because he wouldn't allow much else on the boat. And then he would just say, okay, this is what we learned yesterday, this is it, this is our game plan today, I need you to focus on this, boom, 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 and it was pretty structured. And then the racing, it's fun when you win, and we won a lot. Peter was he was very driven, and people, you could see during the racing, and the first part of the races, people would stay with them, they'd be close. But it would take so much focus and attention and paying attention onto that boat. And people we'd always say, here comes the meltdown, because you could just see slowly people and Peter would just remain headstrong in there. And it was, I don't know that I appreciated it at the time as much as I should have, but looking back those were probably the best days of my life. As a group, we had such a good group of guys together, and then we would sail hard, but we'd party pretty hard too. You can go out afterwards, and not so much during the regatta, but if at the end of the regatta you had won, we had some good blowouts during those times, that's for sure. That's for sure. So I'll keep a lot of those details close to my chest.
Realizing the benefits of the sport of sailing, Peter set his sights toward the America's Cup and ambitiously pursued the possibilities of bringing the prestigious win home. At the time, competing boats would have budgets in excess of $30 million in order to build competitive boats and assemble the right teams to race in it. This was a lofty goal for the small island.
Match racing, unlike fleet racing, where you get a number of boats on a starting line that are all racing around the course together or against each other, match racing is 2 boats facing off one-on-one. And there's a timed pre-start sequence that's very complicated, and the best match racers can figure it out and get the upper hand, and the goal obviously is to get over the starting line first and basically dominate your opponent throughout the race. They're short races, a lot of them are won at the start, so your pre-start skills they have to be exceptional. If you want to be successful, you have to dominate your opponent pre-start and then learn to cover them as you go around the race course. It's very exciting. If you're on a boat, it's unbelievable. It's hectic. It's hard to keep track of how many laps you're doing around the race course. Typically, it's just a windward leeward. You're going up and down, but it's really fast-paced. It's very exciting, and this is what the America's Cup is.
The America's Cup is the ultimate winner-take-all. where the winner of that event dictates how it's defended, where it's defended, the rules, everything. So winning the America's Cup meant that that race could be held in the Virgin Islands rather than in San Francisco, rather than in New Zealand, rather than in New York. And I got that picture. And I also knew that my cohort, Peter Holmberg, was one of the best sailors in the world. One carnival down in the village, Peter and I met up. And he told me his next step was competing in the America's Cup. And that's when I put it to him and said, Peter, why don't you represent the Virgin Islands? And he took back and was like, what are you talking about, Michael? And I laid out a strategy for him as to how we could do it from the Virgin Islands. He went away and he called me back a couple days later and said, you know, that's not that crazy.
A group of Virgin Islanders got together and decided to plan 3 budget scenarios. The lofty $30 million budget, a modest $20 million budget, and a bare-bones $10 million budget. They approached sponsors all over the U.S. territory and put a sample boat in Charlotte Amalia Harbor so that the novice investors would visualize the possibilities.
Peter had been racing regionally and match racing with a local crew, and after the group of community leaders got together and decided to do this America's Cup, Peter took it to another level. He was able to recruit some of the best, most professional America's Cup guys to join this team, and guys like Dave Pedrick, a designer who had won the America's Cup before, and John Cutler, who won the bronze in Korea, and was just a phenomenal guy. And when he joined Peter's match race crew, and they brought in some other guys, Peter's ranking rose to #1 in the world.
Let's make no mistake about it. The America's Cup is not a boat race. It's a technology race, and it costs money. And so the next step is money. I mean, yes, you have to have the quality sailors, which Peter was, and they kind of went immediately by having Peter at the helm. We took that off the table. We were now viable because we had one of the top sailors in the world at the helm. So that was no longer a dispute whether it was a legitimate campaign. The issue was now, how much money can we raise? And that's where all the focus was.
It was not a David and Goliath story in terms of crew. We had the crew. They would come walk.
Well, not so much. I mean, look, until we went to New Zealand on that first trip as a practice trip.
Right.
People thought it was some sort of publicity gimmick. They look. There were a lot of skeptics in the beginning. They said, "What are you trying to sell T-shirts or whatever?" There were a lot of skeptics. People couldn't believe that this little Virgin Islands would do it. And we kept knocking off benchmark after benchmark. And finally, in the organizing event, we took the yacht club officials and the crew to to New York Yacht Club to register. And that's when the world officially knew that
we were serious.
The Virgin Islands was going to participate in the America's Cup.
The team worked hard and was able to raise $5 million toward entering the race. Not quite enough to construct a boat to secure a spot in the race. Still interested in competing, Peter's team merged with Team Dennis Conner, which finished 3rd in the 2000 America's Cup Challenger Series.
Through and up until the America's Cup was all about preparing him for this next step, which is this incredible world of professional racing.
But with all his accomplishments, there was one thing missing in Peter's life.
You would have to say that sailing kind of took over my life, out of college. I had some girlfriends, mind you. I wasn't a solo man, but they all ranked second to my sport. And so I was always, my primary focus was sailing. And so 84, it was the 84 Olympics, and then I was leading up to 88, and then pro sailing came along. My life was just a life of freedom. Nothing mattered but my sailing.
He's the type of person, if he makes a commitment to somebody, he's going to stand by it. And so he was very, very cautious and make sure that he wasn't going to make that move until he was very ready. So he did wait. And so I gave him a lot of credit for that.
Peter is the biggest bachelor of St. Thomas. Nobody knows how I managed to snatch him. I think it all comes down to my cooking.
I met a girl when I was from Puerto Rico. She represented Puerto Rico in the early days in some of our CAC games, Pan Am games, etc. She was also a sailing superstar there, a world champion.
While taking a break from sailing at home in St. Thomas, Peter decided to settle down and start a new adventure, kindling a flame with Denise Balzac of Puerto Rico, a champion sailor in her own right.
I got a gold medal at the '86 Central American Games, and I came second in the Fiji Worlds. I also won a couple of national titles, so that would be U.S. nationals. And I also won the 1989 Hobie 16 Women's Worlds Championship. So that's pretty cool.
She caught my eye, she was my little sweetie. And it turns out years later, we crossed paths a couple times, and I then settled down with her in, hope I'll get this right, honey. I got settled down with her in 1998.
We managed to take a little time in 2004-03, and we came back to St. Thomas after the America's Cup, the last America's Cup in New Zealand in 2003. And we got married at the beach at the yacht club. Really cool wedding, very down to earth with a little soca, a little reggae, some Puerto Ricans from home. And then we built this house.
You know, I feel like he is my own. But I'm telling you, there were two sons, that I will never forget them until death do us part. Because when I think they don't remember, that's the time they call her. Hi, Cynthia. You know, they married and they still keep in touch. I was just their nanny. See? But I'm glad that each of them had a wife. Each of them. But I waiting on Pete to give me a little boy or a little girl, and he just tell me, my wife have plenty niece and nephew. We could get one. We could get one, but oh, they're beautiful, beautiful sons.
Now married, Peter accepted an offer from 2003 America's Cup winner Alanghai of Switzerland to join the Defender as a helmsman. And after 3 years of intense training, Alanghai defeated the Emirates team of New Zealand 5-2, successfully defending the 2007 America's Cup in Valencia, Spain.
Since that point, he's just been probably one of the most sought-after professional skippers, tacticians, strategists in the world.
I think like anything, once you take that step to the next level, you know, there are some growing pains you kind of go through. And but I think he handled it very well through all of it. I mean, going up and racing with those big boys and you know, getting paid for it. I was always very impressed at how he remained very humble through it all. And he loved just as much after going up and spending a week or two racing on these multi-million-dollar boats to coming back and jumping on his boat or somebody else's boat here and doing a little weekend race. I mean, he still does that now. You know, he'll come out and sail with me on my IC-24, which is, you know, just a small little local boat, but those are the best times. And he seems to balance all of that incredibly well.
I travel the world now racing as a pro, and we've had some stars come out of St. Thomas. I put this on the map with my medal. You now got Taylor Canfield killing it around the world, you know, ranked number 1 or 2 in the world in match racing. And people ask me, hey, how, your little island, how you guys producing such good sailors, you know? And my friends and I, we all talked about it. I got asked enough times, and I've come to the conclusion that one of the biggest reasons is because of this facility. Yeah, we got good winds all year, that counts. But this facility right here, this little spot that my parents and their friends chose to build a yacht club is ideal. And the reason being, you can go back and forth across the wind here, and that's baby steps. That's how you learn to sail. You make a mistake, you drift right back in here, your parents catch you. So this actually proved to be the perfect training grounds. Because as kids, you learn to sail, and today as well, little kids, man, 2, 3 years old, get one of these little square boats, Optimus, and by himself sail back and forth. I mean, no kid gets behind a car wheel. No kid drives a go-kart or anything like that at that age, but a sailboat. And you think about what's in their head. You know, they go out here and they're the captain of their own ship at 3, 4, 5 years old. So that is something. Now, to carry on from that, that's what our training, our basic steps were. You go out here and you turn right. So we got this protected bay because you have Great St. James right behind us. So the weather's kind of moderated. No big sea comes in here because that island stops it. You turn left or right and you're in big ocean. It takes me 5 minutes to get in big ocean from here. So if I'm training for a big event, I rig up, I go out here, I turn the corner, I'm in 15-foot sea coming straight across from Africa. I go left, I go out here between St. Thomas and St. John, Pillsbury Sound, current pumps through there. You want to get current against wind and steep sea? Right there. So here's this little jewel of a facility. It's our little yacht club. Beach, easy sailing, big ocean right there. So I really credit this facility, you know. It's nothing fancy, it's a roof, a building, but all the boats here on the beach, straight into sailing. And then our conditions all year. You know, these kids go up now and race against kids in Connecticut and Florida. They only sail for 3, 4 months of the year. The rest of the time it's too cold. Here, all year long, go play, go play. And honestly, you know, with every sport, be it boxing, baseball, basketball, it's about hours. And if you just put it in, it becomes natural instinct for you. And then you can start to think and act on the higher level because all the fundamentals is just natural. So that's what goes on here. Now these kids, as they Antilles School or junior sailors, they come out after school. They got a coach, they go out and they do drills and stuff. When I was doing it, we didn't have none of this. It was me, rig my boat and go, my brother, race against each other, who's the first one across. Now it's more formal and organized, but that's kind of how the world has gone, you know.
Peter Holmberg, now the master helmsman, passes the baton to the youth of his community, wielding a dream of physical fitness, enduring strength, precision, and perseverance. He has achieved great balance in his life, taking on the challenges, facing the unknown, and winning against the tide.